When my wife, Claire, hugged me in the consultation room, tears streaming down her face, telling me I'd beaten cancer, I smiled back and let her believe it was still the two of us against the world. What she didn't know was that I'd found the 847 messages she'd exchanged with my brother Derek 3 weeks earlier. Messages planning out how much longer they'd have to pretend until my treatment wrapped up. Right then, while she was celebrating my survival, I'd already bought 12 acres in Idaho and a Ford Transit van to disappear. My name is Ethan Cole. I was 36 when I got the diagnosis, advanced stage carcinoma. A licensed architect out of Portland State University with my own practice in the Pearl District, pulling in $2 million annually before the disease hit. I'd spent a decade building a career on mathematical precision and obsessive attention to detail. Flawless structural plans, photorealistic 3D renderings, impeccable client relationships. I believed religiously in meritocracy, that exceptional work got rewarded naturally, that real loyalty was returned with equivalent loyalty. My father, a construction worker for 40 years, taught me that personal integrity was worth more than any convenient shortcut. That's why I never seriously questioned it when Claire started going out every night during the first months of chemo, saying she needed to keep up her social life so she wouldn't lose it under the pressure. Never suspected anything when Derek, my younger brother, showed up with homemade soups and classic movie DVDs on nights I spent throwing up in the bathroom. I genuinely thought they were taking care of me in their own way. They were just waiting for me to die or get better fast enough not to get in the way of their plans. Claire Hoffman and I got married in June 2012. Low-key ceremony in Portland with 50 guests. Honeymoon in Cannon Beach. She worked as a marketing manager at a tech startup. I was a junior partner at a traditional architecture firm downtown. The relationship worked perfectly for the first 4 years while I was economically useful. I paid the full down payment on our apartment in the Alberta Arts District, $52,000 cash. I refinanced her credit card debt 3 times in a row between 2014 and 2016, totaling $28,000. I covered all operating costs when she decided to open her own branding consultancy that crashed and burned spectacularly in 18 months, torching $43,000 of our joint assets. Never complained. I thought a healthy relationship meant unconditional support. Derek Cole, my brother, 7 years younger, had always been the charming, irresponsible one in the family. Naturally charismatic, chronically carefree, the type of person who'd borrow $3,000 in January and completely forget about it by February. When he lost his job at a tech company in 2019, I offered him a temporary partnership in my architecture practice until he got back on his feet. He worked 6 months doing mediocre work with secondary clients, then quit saying architecture wasn't his true calling. Claire strongly defended his decision. Derek's confused professionally. You need to have patience. That's what family's for. I had patience. Too much patience, I found out later. The diagnosis came on a gray Tuesday in March 2021. Stage 3B lung carcinoma. 63% 5-year survival rate if I started aggressive chemo immediately. Dr. Richard Hammond, a respected oncologist at Oregon Health and Science University, laid out the protocol in detail. 6 months of intensive treatment, surgery if the tumor responded well, then preventive radiation. Claire held my right hand in that freezing exam room and promised to be by my side through the whole process. Derek hugged me that same night at the apartment and swore he'd take care of whatever I needed. For the first 3 weeks, they delivered religiously. Then the cracks started showing in a predictable pattern. Claire progressively arriving late to chemo sessions, obsessively checking her phone during conversations, heading out for networking dinners that consistently ended at 3 in the morning. Derek showing up strategically when she disappeared, bringing Thai food I couldn't eat, keeping me company in silence, playing the exemplary brother.
Until that afternoon in June when I got back from the hospital 3 hours early because the session got canceled due to another patient's medical emergency. I found the two of them in the living room of my apartment, sitting way too close on the leather couch I'd bought with a commercial project bonus in 2019. Hands intertwined naturally, laughing at some inside joke that completely excluded my existence. Physical intimacy that shouldn't exist between in-laws. When I walked in, they separated fast like teenagers caught by their parents. Claire said Derek had just stopped by to drop off some documents from the office. He nervously confirmed it. I smiled, thanked them, pretended to believe it completely. That night, while Claire was ostentatiously sleeping on the couch to give me space to rest better, I unlocked her phone. The passcode was still our wedding anniversary. I scrolled through her conversations with Derek methodically for 40 minutes. 847 messages exchanged over 4 months. Intimate photos that burned into my visual memory. Specific plans discussed in clinical detail. Phrases that got permanently etched in. He's too busy trying not to die to notice anything, and 8 more weeks of chemo according to the doctor. Then we'll see how things shake out. Each word was a precise emotional stab, but oddly, I didn't cry. Just systematically photographed all the digital evidence with my own phone, saved copies to an encrypted cloud service, and closed her device exactly as it was. The next morning, when Claire brought me coffee with milk in bed and asked worriedly how I was feeling, I answered calmly, "Getting better." She smiled relieved, kissed my forehead, said she had to head out for an important meeting. I drank the coffee watching her get ready with excessive care for a client meeting. Watching her perform as the dedicated wife was educational. Right then, my decision was completely made. I wasn't going to confront them dramatically, wasn't going to scream demanding explanations, wasn't going to beg for reconciliation. I was going to beat the cancer, finish the full treatment, and methodically disappear, because I realized with absolute clarity that they didn't deserve my explosive rage. They deserved my permanent silence.
7 weeks later, Dr. Hammond confirmed during a follow-up. Tumor reduced by an impressive 68%. Tissue responding exceptionally well to the protocol. Excellent candidate for removal surgery in 3 months. Prognosis changed dramatically from 63 to 89% long-term survival. Claire cried tears that seemed genuine. Derek paid for a celebratory dinner at an expensive steakhouse in downtown Portland. I smiled appropriately, thanked them for their emotional support, pretended we were a functional family. That same night, after they left to celebrate properly together while I rested at home, I opened a completely new bank account at a different financial institution. I transferred $127,000 I'd kept in personal savings from before the marriage, plus $220,000 from stock and bond investment funds I'd never explicitly mentioned to Claire. Money quietly accumulated over a decade of parallel freelance projects, specialized technical consulting, obsessive saving of bonus percentages. I spent the next 3 weeks researching isolated rural properties in Idaho, specifically the mountainous Coeur d'Alene region, sparse population, harsh climate that keeps out casual tourists, real geographical isolation. Found the perfect listing. 12 acres of virgin forest with a small 900-square-foot log cabin built in 1978 by a retired veteran, no connection to the municipal electrical grid, wood heating, artesian well water. Asking price, $68,000. I called Sharon Mitchell, a local real estate broker, and closed the complete transaction in 10 days, paying cash without a detailed inspection. I bought a used 2015 Ford Transit with 93,000 miles on the odometer for $18,000. Equipped the interior with organizer shelves and a basic cargo tie-down system. Spent $3,200 on professional carpentry tools, Makita circular saw, Milwaukee impact drill, complete set of Japanese chisels, orbital sander, portable workbench, bought 37 technical books on building off-grid systems, advanced carpentry, residential plumbing, independent power generation. I sold my 40% ownership stake in the architecture firm to Jeff Morrison, my senior partner, for $95,000. Substantially below real market value, but Jeff didn't question it because I didn't explain the true reasons. Just said I needed to step away permanently for health reasons. He accepted discreetly. I packed essential belongings over 6 nighttime trips while Claire was sleeping heavily or working late. Practical clothes, important documents, old family photographs that didn't include Claire or Derek, laptop with backups of personal architectural projects. On the last early morning before the planned departure, I left my wedding ring on her nightstand next to a concise, handwritten note. I know everything. No need to explain or justify. Take care. Ethan. I locked the apartment door for the last time at 5:30 on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. Went down to the underground parking, started the van's engine, and programmed the GPS for the address in Coeur d'Alene. 9 hours and 40 minutes later, I arrived at the property at golden sunset, cutting through the Bitterroot Mountains. Turned off the engine, got out of the van, breathed in the cold, high-altitude air deeply. For the first time in 8 months, I didn't feel physical pain in my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the emotional weight of transactional relationships.
2 months after settling in Idaho, I met Raymond Dunham on a freezing December morning. He just showed up driving a faded red 1987 Chevrolet pickup, long, unkempt white beard, enormous hands marked by visible decades of heavy manual labor. Ray was 68, a retired carpenter with a legendary reputation in the local Kootenai County community. He walked onto my property without asking formal permission, headed straight to where I was working on the cabin roof, watched for a full 5 minutes in absolute silence. Finally said in a deep voice, "The roof's bone structure's solid, but the individual shingles are spaced too close together. You're going to get guaranteed leaks when the heavy January snow hits. External plumbing doesn't have adequate thermal insulation. It'll freeze completely solid in the first cold wave below -15. He offered practical help 3 times a week without discussing payment. I accepted because I desperately needed local expertise. Over the next 8 weeks, Ray taught me knowledge that no technical manual or university course could transmit. How to feel the density and moisture of wood just by running your hand over the surface, identifying whether it was ready for structural cutting or needed more drying time. How to adjust the precise angle of the saw based exclusively on the wood grain's natural direction, minimizing waste and maximizing strength. How to read an old building structure and intuitively identify points that needed reinforcement before collapse happened. One gray afternoon in January, while we were sanding together a solid oak table we'd built from scratch using a tree knocked down by a storm, Ray asked directly why a successful Portland architect had come to live alone in an isolated Idaho cabin. I hesitated briefly, but he deserved basic honesty. I had serious cancer, almost died during intensive treatment, and while I was literally fighting to survive, the 2 people I trusted most in the entire world systematically betrayed me. Ray stayed in thoughtful silence for a full minute, continuing the rhythmic sanding, then asked calmly, "Wife and brother?" When I asked surprised how he'd figured it out, he answered, "Because every time you mention Portland, your voice goes completely empty, but when you talk about the work here, your voice gets full." 3 weeks later, Ray took me to an informal dinner with other veteran carpenters from the region at a local tavern. Marcus Reeves, a 60-year-old black man with hands the size of plates, pulled me aside after the second beer. "I went through an almost identical situation 22 years ago. My wife left me for my best friend and business partner. I came to Idaho, bought land, built custom furniture, learned painfully that you don't need many people in life to be happy, you just need the right people. That night, sitting alone on the porch I'd built with my own hands while the temperature dropped to -12 degrees, I realized that Ray and Marcus weren't validating my cowardly escape from Portland. They were validating my courageous rebuilding of identity.
6.5 months after arriving in Idaho, I heard the unmistakable sound of tires on the gravel access road to the property. A silver Honda Civic stopped hesitantly in front of the cabin. The driver's door opened slowly. Claire. Physically transformed. Too thin for her height, deep dark circles under her eyes. Her previously impeccable hair now sloppy and uncut for months. Wrinkled clothes like she'd been sleeping in the car. She said nervously she needed to talk in person, that the relationship with Derek had been a colossal mistake, that she truly loved me, that we could fix everything if I'd give it a real chance. I responded with rehearsed calm. It was 4 months of documented betrayal, 847 messages exchanged, intimate photos, specific plans discussing when this would finally be over. She froze completely, tried to justify with predictable excuses. She was scared of losing me. Derek offered comfort when she was vulnerable. They never planned to hurt anyone. Cried performatively. Begged with rehearsed drama. I explained without audible anger, you systematically used me as financial security and emotional stability while you secretly had your fun with my brother. Derek used me as an economic safety net and professional ladder. I allowed it completely because I mistakenly believed that being useful was equivalent to being loved. But I learned a different truth here in Idaho, working with wood and building structures. I don't need to be instrumentally useful to have intrinsic value. I can simply exist. Claire asked with a broken voice if I was genuinely happy living there. I consciously looked at my transformed hands. Thick calluses on my fingers. Linear scars from minor accidents with tools. Nails permanently stained with varnish and oil. Hands that built tangible things that lasted generations. Hands that didn't shake anymore from chronic anxiety. I answered honestly, yes, for the first time in my adult life. She wanted to know, vulnerably, if I'd consider giving the relationship a second chance. I responded with definitive clarity. You literally had every possible chance while I was hospitalized receiving chemo, while I was losing hair in clumps in the shower, while I was throwing up alone at 3 a.m. with nobody holding my head. Every one of those horrible nights was an opportunity to choose loyalty, and you consistently chose Derek. Claire silently got in the car and drove back down the gravel road. 20 minutes later, Ray showed up with hot coffee in a thermos. Asked if it was someone important from the past. I confirmed briefly. Ex-wife. Ray asked directly if I wanted to go back to Portland. I answered without hesitation, no. He said simply, good, because you've built something valuable here. Would be a monumental mistake to throw it away. I didn't need to execute elaborate revenge or active destruction. Just removed my presence and watched the system work naturally. In the following months, through occasional contact with mutual acquaintances and sporadic social media searches motivated by morbid curiosity, I discovered predictable developments. Claire and Derek tried an official public relationship. Didn't last 4 full months before imploding spectacularly. Fundamental, real incompatibility without me as the unifying element and common enemy.
Derek lost his job again due to chronic incompetence, tried to borrow money from multiple mutual friends who knew the betrayal details, and cut contact definitively. Claire sold the apartment in the Alberta Arts District that we'd originally financed together, shouldered accumulated debts alone, moved to Seattle accepting a lower position at a smaller company. My parents, who'd always treated Derek as the favorite son due to his superficial charisma, finally saw the destructive pattern of parasitism, when he tried to move in with them indefinitely without contributing financially or helping domestically. Jeff Morrison, my ex-partner at the architecture firm, sent me an unexpected email 8 months later saying the company had grown by an impressive 40% in revenue after my departure, not because I'd been professional dead weight, but because the emotional toxicity that Claire and Derek constantly brought to my psychological state for years had completely evaporated. The system worked exactly as it should. I just removed my artificial support and watched the structural collapse that was inevitable. There were no truly innocent victims in this specific story to rescue dramatically, but I realized over the months that some people deserved to know fragments of the truth. I called Linda Chen, the former receptionist at the architecture firm, who had always been impeccably professional and loyal for 7 years. I offered her a detailed professional reference when she was looking for a new job after the firm went through restructuring, wrote a 2-page recommendation letter highlighting specific competencies. I sent an honest email to Jeff Morrison briefly explaining the real reasons for my abrupt departure. It wasn't about dissatisfaction with architecture or problems with the partnership. It was exclusively about the urgent need to preserve my mental health and enable a complete fresh start. I sincerely thanked him for 15 years of honest and respectful business partnership, sent a handwritten card to Dr. Richard Hammond thanking him for exceptional care during oncological treatment and informing him I was in confirmed complete remission. Small gestures directed at people who'd made a positive difference in my life without ever asking for anything in return. Fundamentally different from Claire and Derek, who only offered something when they calculated a bigger return. 18 months after arriving in Idaho, the daily routine was completely established and working organically. Waking up at 6 in the morning with natural light coming through windows I'd installed personally, strong coffee on the cedar porch, watching morning fog dramatically rising from the Bitterroot Mountains. 3 hours of concentrated work in the workshop, building custom furniture on commission for local families. Simple lunch of a sandwich and fruit. Afternoon dedicated entirely to ongoing property maintenance or personal improvement projects. Quiet evening, reading technical manuals or casually talking with Ray and other carpenters at the local tavern. The cabin had been completely transformed. Roof professionally waterproofed with correctly spaced ceramic tiles, double-paned windows for insulation during Idaho's harsh winter, functional plumbing with industrial thermal insulation, diesel backup generator running smoothly, high-efficiency wood-burning stove heating. The attached shed became a complete and organized workshop. 12-foot workbench built in solid oak, tools systematically hung on pegboard wall, permanent smell of fresh cedar and marin varnish. I was getting regular growing orders, rustic dining tables for families, custom shelves for residential libraries, wooden benches for the local Methodist church, children's beds with artisanal detailing. I didn't charge high prices because I didn't need luxury. Lived comfortably on less than $1,000 a month. No unnecessary waste, no superfluous luxuries, no people constantly draining vital energy. One golden September afternoon, finishing a dining table commissioned by a young family in Coeur d'Alene, I realized with surprise that I hadn't thought about Claire or Derek for complete weeks. Not through conscious effort of mental suppression, but because they simply didn't matter emotionally anymore. Memories of them were like old faded photographs from another completely different life, from another Ethan who naively believed that blind unilateral loyalty was an admirable virtue. Ray showed up that day carrying local craft beer from a county microbrewery. We sat on the porch watching the sunset dramatically cutting through the mountain peaks. He commented observationally, "You look fundamentally different from the broken man who arrived here a year and a half ago." I answered honestly, "I am different." He asked, "Better?" I thought carefully for a moment.
Not necessarily better in a morally superior sense, just finally authentic. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't performing a personality to please other people, wasn't constantly proving instrumental value, wasn't being useful as currency exchanged for conditional affection. I was just existing authentically, and that was completely enough. Sometimes people ask if I don't miss Portland, the established architecture career, the sophisticated urban life. I consistently answer that I don't miss what actually concretely existed there. Emotional exploitation, disguised as true love, rigorously unilateral loyalty, fundamentally transactional relationships. Ray taught me that naturally cracked wood can still become something beautiful and functional. Every board I work with daily in the workshop has inherent imperfections, irregular dark knots, unpredictable twisted grains, natural cracks from growth. I learned not to automatically discard those imperfect pieces, learned to work strategically around the structural flaws, to transform them into unique characteristics that add character. That's precisely what I did with myself over these 18 months. Took a man deeply broken by aggressive cancer and devastating family betrayal and methodically transformed him into a carpenter who builds tangible things that last generations. If you've ever felt that your genuine loyalty was consistently treated as exploitable weakness, that your personal value was rigorously conditioned on your instrumental usefulness, that people you loved deeply were just waiting for you to be convenient before discarding you, know that radical restart isn't cowardice. Sometimes the most powerful possible revenge is simply stopping artificially supporting people who never reciprocally supported you, letting them face the natural consequences of their selfish choices without you as a permanent safety net. It doesn't need to be cinematically dramatic, doesn't need to be intentionally cruel, just needs to be definitive. I drew my line in the isolated mountains of Idaho. Where are you going to draw yours?